Imagine this: the largest, most disciplined army in the world. Rome's pride marches confidently into the fields of Cannae in 216 BC. 80,000 Roman soldiers. They believed victory was already theirs. After all, they outnumbered their enemy almost 2-1. In their minds, the Carthaginian general Hannibal was cornered, exhausted, and about to be crushed once and for all. But history had other plans. What unfolded that day wasn't just a battle, it was a perfect trap, one of the deadliest ambushes ever executed. Hannibal, with far fewer men, orchestrated a maneuver so daring and so precise that military academies still study it over 2,000 years later. The Romans didn't just lose, they were slaughtered in one of the bloodiest defeats the ancient world had ever seen. To understand how it happened, you need to know the stakes. The Second Punic War had already shaken Rome to its core. Hannibal had marched an army across the Alps, yes, the Alps with war elephants, shocking the Romans by invading their homeland from the north. He had already humiliated Rome at Trebia and Lake Trasimene. But Rome was stubborn. They refused to yield. They assembled their largest army yet, led by 2 consuls, determined to finally crush Hannibal. The battlefield? A flat, open plain near the town of Cannae in southern Italy. Perfect ground, Rome thought, for their heavy infantry to simply steamroll the Carthaginians. It was Rome's comfort zone. Their massive columns of soldiers could push forward like an unstoppable wall. But Hannibal saw something different. He saw arrogance. He saw an enemy convinced of victory before the first sword was drawn, and he planned to use that arrogance against them. Instead of matching Rome's strength for strength, Hannibal arranged his troops in a strange formation. He placed his weakest soldiers, the Gauls and Iberians, in the very center. Behind them, he held his strongest African infantry in reserve. On the wings, he stationed his deadly cavalry, especially the Numidian horsemen, who could outrun and outmaneuver anything Rome had. It looked, to the Romans, like a gift. They would smash through Hannibal's flimsy center, break the Carthaginian line in half, and claim the glory of victory. But that was exactly what Hannibal wanted. As the sun rose over Cannae, dust clouds filled the horizon, shields glistened in the heat, and 2 armies prepared to decide the fate of Italy. Rome had numbers, Hannibal had genius. And when the trap finally closed, it would become a nightmare the Romans would never forget. The battle began with thunder. Roman horns blared, tens of thousands of sandals pounded the dusty plain, and the legionaries pushed forward like a single massive machine. The Roman commanders, Varro and Paulus, believed this was simple. Crush the Carthaginian center, sweep aside the rest. Victory by brute force. At first, it looked like Rome was right. Hannibal's center, made up of Gauls and Iberians, bent under the pressure. They gave ground, step by step, retreating in a slow curve. To the Romans, this was a gift the enemy was already breaking. The more the Carthaginian line bowed backward, the harder the Romans pressed. Shouts of triumph echoed across the field. The trap was working, but only Hannibal knew it. Because this wasn't weakness, this was choreography. Picture the shape of the Carthaginian line. At the start it was straight, but as the Romans pushed, it curled inward, forming a crescent. The Romans, eager to drive their spears deeper, surged into the pocket. They thought they were driving Hannibal into collapse. In reality, they were walking into a funnel, every step narrowing their space, cramming more and more men into tighter ground. That's when Hannibal unleashed his wings. On both flanks, the Carthaginian African infantry, disciplined, heavily armed, and fresh, pivoted inward. Suddenly, Rome's sides weren't free anymore. They were under attack. Legionaries, who thought they were pressing a retreat, now found spears and shields hammering into them from both sides. But the final blow came from the cavalry. Hannibal's Numidian horsemen had already driven off the Roman cavalry in a furious clash earlier in the battle. Once the Roman horse was gone, Hannibal's riders didn't chase them, they circled back. Crashing into the rear of the Roman army, they slammed the door shut. In that moment, 80,000 Romans were trapped inside a shrinking circle of death. Imagine it, thousands of men packed so tightly they could barely swing their swords. Dust and sweat choked the air. Shields pressed against shields, men crushed shoulder to shoulder, unable to breathe, let alone fight. And the Carthaginians closed in tighter, ring by ring. The Roman advance had turned into a cage. The hunter had become the hunted. Some accounts say the killing went on for hours. Others claim it lasted an entire day. What's certain is the scale. Rome lost nearly 50,000 men, entire consular armies gone. Senators, nobles, soldiers all cut down in the dirt. It wasn't just a defeat, it was annihilation. And yet, standing at the center of it all, Hannibal had not only destroyed a Roman army, he had shattered the illusion of Roman invincibility. But the question lingered. With Rome's greatest army destroyed, why didn't Hannibal march on the city itself? When the dust settled on the plain of Cannae, the numbers told a horror story. Out of roughly 80,000 Roman troops, at least 50,000 lay dead. The fields were littered with broken shields, twisted swords, and bodies piled so high ancient writers claimed rivers of blood soaked the soil. Rome had suffered the single worst defeat in its entire history. And Hannibal? He had done the impossible. With fewer men, far from home, he had crushed the greatest military machine in the world. His officers urged him, "March on Rome now, the gates will open, the city will crumble in fear." But Hannibal didn't move, and this is where history splits into one of its great debates. Why didn't he take the chance to finish Rome once and for all? First, logistics. Hannibal's army, brilliant as it was exhausted. His men had fought all day in the summer heat. Supplies were low, reinforcements far away. Marching on Rome meant a long siege, and Hannibal lacked the heavy siege equipment needed to breach the city's formidable walls. Second, strategy. Hannibal believed that Rome wasn't just a city, it was an idea. He thought that by destroying Rome's armies in the field, one after another, the Italian allies who supplied Rome with soldiers and grain would abandon her. If Rome lost her allies, the Republic would collapse from within. Cannae, Hannibal thought, was the turning point that would force Italy to flip. And for a moment, it almost worked. Some southern Italian cities did defect to Hannibal. Macedon, across the sea, even declared itself his ally. The dream of breaking Rome wasn't fantasy anymore, it was within reach. But here's the twist. Rome refused to die. Instead of surrendering, the Roman Senate did the unthinkable. They recruited teenagers, old men, even slaves, to form new legions. They forbade mourning for the dead, declaring that grief was weakness. And most importantly, Rome didn't abandon its allies, it punished them. Cities that even considered joining Hannibal were crushed with brutal efficiency. Rome had lost the battle, but not the war. And in the years that followed, Hannibal found himself stranded in Italy, unable to deliver the killing blow. He had shown the world tactical genius at Cannae, but he hadn't destroyed Rome's heart. The Republic, battered but unbroken, was learning, and when Rome learned, the world burned. Cannae wasn't the end of Rome, it was the beginning of Rome's most ruthless phase. More than 2,000 years later, generals still whisper Hannibal's name when they study the art of war. Why? Because Cannae wasn't just a victory. It was perfection, a battle where every move, every trap, every detail unfolded exactly as the commander intended. The double envelopment Hannibal used at Cannae remains the holy grail of battlefield tactics. Imagine a straight Roman line, pressing forward with crushing numbers. Hannibal bent his line like a bowstring, drawing them in. Then the wings snapped shut, the cavalry struck from behind, and the Romans were trapped in a cage of their own making. Military academies from West Point to Sandhurst teach Cannae as the ultimate case study in strategy. Napoleon studied it. Frederick the Great admired it. Even in World War II, German generals like von Schlieffen and Hitler's staff tried to recreate the Cannae model on the fields of Europe. Whenever an army dreams of surrounding and annihilating its enemy, They're dreaming of Hannibal's masterpiece. But the legacy isn't just military, it's psychological. Cannae proved that even the strongest power can be broken in a single day if their opponent fights smarter, not harder. It's the underdog's dream. The weaker side, with brilliance and daring, can destroy a giant. And yet, the other half of the legacy is Rome's response. The Republic absorbed the greatest defeat in its history and refused to collapse. Most nations would have surrendered. Rome doubled down. In a way, the legacy of Cannae belongs as much to Rome as to Hannibal.